Actress Debbie Reynolds has passed away, as confirmed by her son Todd Fisher. This news comes just one day after her daughter, Carrie Fisher, died. Debbie Reynolds, who was 60, always showed bravery in her life. Debbie Reynolds remained cheerful and smiled while discussing her split from Eddie Fisher. She laughed about it, but kept her sadness hidden from everyone. Everyone was surprised when she died just one day after her daughter, Carrie Fisher. An 84-year-old actor was taken to a hospital in Los Angeles after having a stroke. I have to share the story about a strange phone call that revealed a lot and how it led to Elizabeth Taylor's unexpected remark on a cruise ship years later. This is the true story of how a seemingly ideal Hollywood marriage came to an end. We are sorry to report that Debbie Reynolds has died. We shared information about her with you earlier. Debbie Reynolds had a stroke today, just one day after her daughter Carrie Fisher died. TMZ reported that her son Todd said, "She's with Carrie now." Debbie Reynolds was born on April 1, 1932 in El Paso, Texas. Her family was very poor during the Great Depression, so she was born in a charity hospital because her parents couldn't pay for better care. Her father, Raymond, worked as a train worker and earned only $7 a week. Her mom, Maxine, did the laundry to help the family. Their life was hard and they often depended on government help and wore secondhand clothes. When Debbie was a baby, the hot weather in Texas made her very sick, but her parents couldn't pay for a doctor. Instead, they placed her in front of an ice box to help cool her down. It was a risky plan, but it wound up saving her life. Debbie's family was very religious and went to church regularly. She grew up believing strongly in her faith. When she was 7 years old, she sang "Jesus Loves Me" for the first time in front of a crowd at a church picnic. No one imagined that this little girl, who had never seen a movie, would someday become a star. Hollywood star in 1939. When Debbie was 7, her family moved to Burbank, California. Her dad heard about job opportunities there and decided to take a chance. They packed everything into an old car and drove. They traveled 1,500 miles, but when they got there, the job they were promised didn't exist. The family had to live in their car for 3 weeks near Warner Brothers' studio. They used gas station bathrooms to wash up and depended on kind strangers for food. Eventually, her dad got a job as a carpenter and they moved into a small old house. Life in California was tough, but Debbie started to do well. She joined the Girl Scouts and learned how to twirl a baton. Debbie liked to spin around and played the French horn in the Burbank Youth Symphony. Her family was low on money, so she often wore old clothes and shoes that were patched with cardboard. Once, she wore a dress made from cotton bags to a school dance. It made her feel ashamed, but it also motivated her. As she got older, she began to collect beautiful Hollywood clothes, since she didn't have any when she was younger. In 1948, when she was 16 years old, Debbie took part in the Miss Burbank Beauty Contest. She didn't care about winning, she just wanted the free blouse and scarf for the rivals. She wore a second-hand swimsuit and performed a funny lip-sync act, and she was surprised to win. Hollywood talent scouts were in the crowd and flipped a coin to choose who would sign her. Warner Brothers won, and 2 days later, Debbie got her first deal, earning $65 a week. For someone who had grown up poor, that was a lot of money. Hollywood, at first, life was tough for her. The studio thought her name, Mary Frances, was boring, so they changed it to Debbie, which she didn't like. Her first job was to address envelopes and give tours of the studio. Her first acting role was as an extra in a movie called June Bride, where she had to carry a cake in one scene. She was so nervous that she nearly dropped it. The studio tried hard to change Debbie's image. They sent her to speech classes to help her get rid of her Texas accent, and they made her wear. Debbie had the choice to get tooth caps to make her smile better and to have surgery to fix her ears. She refused the surgery because she didn't want Hollywood to determine her appearance. The studio didn't allow her to date for her image's sake, so they set up fake dates with other stars for photos to make her seem like an ideal star. Debbie landed her first acting role in the movie The Daughter of Rosie O'Grady in 1950. She had some trouble because the director didn't like her ears and told the makeup team to glue them to her head. The lights got too hot and melted the glue, which made her ears pop out while she was recording. Even so, Debbie's talent and charm stood out, and by the time she left Warner Brothers, she had built a strong reputation. By the time she was 18 and started working at MGM, she had already appeared in 3 movies. She wasn't the youngest there, but she didn't know as much as some of the others. MGM had faith in her and gave her tough training. She learned how to act, sing, dance, and speak and walk correctly. Debbie had her first part in 1951. You have a role in a Technicolor movie called Mr. Debbie collaborated with Lana Turner on the movie Imperium, but it wasn't successful. It helped her feel more at ease in front of the camera. That same year, she was in another movie called The Affairs of Dobby Gillis, where she had a small but funny role. People started to see her comedy skills, which made her stand out, even in small parts. Debbie worked very hard in MGM's rehearsal rooms, which felt like her second home. She practiced dancing so much that her feet would bleed. She felt out of place next to the skilled dancers who had years of training that she didn't have. Later, she shared her concerns about not fitting in. This made her job even more difficult. By the end of 1951, MGM was getting ready to make the musical Singing in the Rain, which would later become one of the most famous movies ever. Debbie was chosen to play Kathy Selden, even though she didn't have much dancing practice. She was set to act with Gene Kelly and Donald O'Connor, who were both very skilled. Debbie Reynolds was a great dancer in Hollywood, but some people, including Gene Kelly, had doubts about her skills. Filming Singing in the Rain was hard for her. She had just 3 months to prepare and worked long hours, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. Her feet started to bleed from dancing. When she mentioned the pain to Gene, he advised her to simply clean it up. One of the toughest parts was the Good Morning dance, where she had to keep up with Gene and Donald O'Connor. Filming took 15 hours, and by the end, Debbie was so tired that someone had to carry her to her changing room. She stayed in bed for 2 days after that, but later she made jokes about what happened. Debbie said that singing in the rain and having a baby were the hardest things she ever did. Even with the challenges, her acting in the movie amazed everyone. In the movie, she portrayed Kathy Selden, a young woman with big dreams, just like Debbie. The movie came out in 1952 and was very successful. People enjoyed her dancing and singing, even though she picked it up very fast. She quickly rose from being an ordinary actress to a big star. Debbie reflected that when she was younger, she was ignorant and didn't believe she could fail. The training she had for Singing in the Rain was very hard. Gene Kelly was very strict and wanted her to be perfect. He hardly ever gave her compliments. She later mentioned that he was a fantastic dancer and a professional, but he was also quite hard on her. She got so upset that she crawled under a piano and cried. Fred Astaire discovered her and gave her some advice, saying that working hard is needed to learn how to dance. He let her watch him practice, showing her how much effort it takes to be successful. After the success of Sing in the Rain in 1952, she kept working, making 18 movies in 7 years. She often worked long hours, sometimes up to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. It was exhausting, but she didn't give up. In 1955, while preparing for the movie The Tender Trap, she had a frightening accident. She accidentally swallowed a lit cigarette, which hurt her throat a lot, so she had to go to the hospital. Surprisingly, she returned to work the next day, even though she could hardly talk. This showed her strength and drive. In 1957, Debbie played a main part in Tammy and the Bachelor, which is one of her most famous films. Making the movie was tough. The first director quit after an argument with Debbie, and her co-star, Leslie, had a bad reaction to mosquito bites while they were shooting in Louisiana, which made his face swell up. Makeup artists often had to use special effects to make Debbie look normal, which could take a lot of time, sometimes several hours. At the same time, Debbie had a big secret. She was 3 months pregnant with her daughter, Carrie Fisher. She kept it a secret because she was afraid the company might fire her. Costume makers dressed her in loose dresses and used props to hide her belly. The movie became very famous, and so did the song Tammy, which Debbie performed. Debbie struggled to record the song. She thought her voice wasn't good enough and didn't want to participate, but the company pressured her and even threatened her job. She had laryngitis, which made it hard for her to hit the high notes. She needed 38 attempts and spent many hours to finish the recording. The song came out in August 1957 and became very popular. Tammy was the #1 song in America, staying at the top for 5 weeks. It even beat songs by Elvis Presley and Pat Boone, which was amazing. The song sold over 2 million copies, earning Debbie her first gold record. It also inspired more Tammy movies and even helped influence the name of Motown Records. By the end of the 1950s, Debbie was one of the most successful stars in Hollywood. In 1959, she signed a deal with MGM for $750,000 a year, which today would be like earning $7 million. She made more money than many male actors, which were very rare at the time for one movie. The Mating Game, she was paid $250,000, while her male co-star Tony Randall earned $75,000. Debbie was savvy with her money. In 1960, she was one of the first stars to ask for a share of a movie's profits. She earned 10% of the film's earnings, which gave her an extra $1 million. But being a star was not always easy. Debbie later shared how much power studios had over her life, choosing everything from her clothes to her friendships. In her autobiography, she shared that in 1956, MGM pushed her to have an abortion because they were worried that being pregnant would hurt her career. Even though she had difficulties that could have affected her job and reputation, Debbie Reynolds stayed strong and became a beloved star. She met Eddie Fisher for the first time in 1951 during a USO tour in Korea, where they were entertaining wounded soldiers. Even though they weren't close back then, 19-year-old Debbie thought Eddie was charming and good-looking. 3 years later, on August 19th, 1954, Eddie surprised her by coming to the filming of her movie Athena. This meeting was planned because Eddie wanted to meet Debbie, and a director at MGM helped set it up. Debbie later mentioned that meeting Eddie was her favorite part of making the movie. At lunch in the studio cafeteria, everyone noticed their strong connection, and photographers rushed to take photos, believing they could be the next big celebrity couple in Hollywood. The next day, Eddie got Debbie's phone number from his friend Johnny Grant and called her. He asked her to his show at the Coconut Grove nightclub, and this made Debbie's mom very happy since she was a big fan of Eddie. Debbie didn't realize that Eddie had also asked another woman to the same event until later, and Debbie's relationship moved incredibly fast. On just their third date, Eddie oozed with an enormous 11-carat diamond ring. Debbie said it was the biggest diamond she'd ever seen. A little over a year later, on September 17th, 1955, they got married at the Ginger's Catskill Resort Hotel in New York. The wedding was massive, with over 3,000 uninvited fans trying to sneak in. Security was so tight that even some invited guests had trouble getting in. Debbie wore a pink law gown and Eddie wore a midnight blue tuxedo. It all looked perfect, but Debbie almost called the wedding off days before. She told a friend she felt like things were moving too quickly and she wasn't sure about going through with it. Her parents and MGM bosses urged her to marry him. Their honeymoon wasn't the romantic trip they wanted. Instead, they spent 30 days traveling and performing in 30 different places. Debbie later said that their busy routine added stress to their new marriage and suggested that there might be more problems ahead. Their first child, Carrie Fisher, was born on October 21, 1956, after a difficult 36-hour labor. Eddie tried to make her feel better by singing "Oh My Papa" while she was giving birth. Carrie was born right when the movie Bundle of Joy was coming out, so the studio rushed Debbie to go to the screening just 2 weeks after she had the baby. After giving birth, she was very tired but still went out because the studio wanted to maintain a good image. Their second child, Todd Fisher, was born on February 24, 1958, and he was named after Elizabeth Taylor's husband, Mike Todd, who had died in a plane crash. Debbie and Eddie were seen as the ideal Hollywood couple, with fans calling them America's sweethearts. The media adored them, and they appeared on magazine covers, attended glamorous events, and even acted together in movies. On the TV show This Is Your Life in 1959, Eddie sang to Debbie in front of millions of viewers. Their home in Beverly Hills was also part of their public image, featured in magazines that showed a perfect family life. They even released matching perfumes to promote their happy marriage. However, this picture was ruined when Eddie had an affair with Elizabeth Taylor. Debbie had to deal with the sadness while taking care of their children. In March 1958, Mike Todd, who was married to Elizabeth, died in a plane crash. Elizabeth was only 26 years old and felt very sad about his death. Eddie wanted to help her, but he started having feelings for Elizabeth. By the end of the year, he left Debbie and their 2 young kids, including Carrie. When Reynolds was almost 2 years old, Todd, who was still a baby, went to stay with Taylor. To make it worse, Taylor and Reynolds had been close friends since they were teenagers, and Reynolds had no idea this betrayal was about to happen. One night in September 1958, at a party, she noticed that everyone was acting weird. She felt uncomfortable and called Eddie in New York, but he didn't pick up. Instead, Elizabeth Taylor picked up the phone, and Reynolds quickly understood what was going on. She later mentioned that she heard Taylor asking who was calling, and it was obvious they were together. Reynolds was surprised when Eddie Fisher left her, especially because she had just had their son Todd, who was named after Mike Todd. Eddie was at the hospital pretending that everything was okay. In May 1959, a few months later, Fisher and Reynolds got officially split. Reynolds initially didn't want to divorce Eddie because she hoped he would come back. Being a Catholic, she felt strongly about her marriage vows. For months, she wouldn't sign the divorce papers, causing a lot of stress, especially because Eddie was living with Elizabeth Taylor. The media enjoyed this confusing situation and called it Hollywood's weirdest trio. Reynolds thought it was time to move on, saying, "I realized it's useless to cling to something that is gone. I had to consider my children." On May 12, 1959, she accepted the divorce, and just a few hours later, Fisher and Taylor got married. Many people in America felt sorry for Debbie Reynolds because she was a single mother with two young kids after her husband left her for a Hollywood star. The people fully backed her, and the media called it a complicated love triangle. Reynolds tried to be strong for her children, and others admired her for that. She even went on TV wearing diaper pins on her blouse to show her focus on being a mom. At the same time, Eddie Fisher's success started to go down. He was a well-known singer and TV star, but hey, after the scandal, his NBC show was canceled and his friends stopped supporting him. People protested outside his shows, calling him a homewrecker. He never regained his fame. On the other hand, Elizabeth Taylor stayed in the public eye. She was already well known for her flashy and scandalous love life, and this situation just made her more famous. Even with criticism, she still made a lot of money from her movies. After her tough split from Eddie Fisher in 1959, Debbie Reynolds had to take care of her two young kids, Carrie and Tom, while trying to get her career back on track. It was a tough period, but she kept going and signed a $1 million deal. In 1960, she began releasing popular songs like Am I That Easy to Forget? At the same time, she performed in nightclubs in Las Vegas and Lake Tahoe. She worked hard, doing 2 shows every night, 7 days a week for most of the year. Despite her busy schedule, she made sure to spend time with her kids. Every weekend, she would drive back to Los Angeles after her Saturday show, spend all day Sunday with her children, and then return to Vegas for her Monday night performance. During this time, she only slept about 4 hours a night for 2 years, but she kept pushing forward. Debbie didn't just sing. She also included jokes and impressions of famous stars like Zsa Zsa Gabor and Katharine Hepburn. People loved her performances, and by 1962, she was one of the highest paid acts in nightclubs, earning $115,000 a week. Debbie said that playing in nightclubs helped her learn acting, comedy, and singing, which improved her skills as an entertainer. Meanwhile, Debbie was concentrating on her acting career. In 1965, she got an important part in The Unsinkable Molly Brown, which transformed her life. This job was supposed to go to Shirley Millán, but when she couldn't accept it, Debbie put in a lot of effort to show she was the best choice. She learned to play the piano and practiced dancing. Debbie put in a lot of effort and really tried her best while shooting. She did her own moves and had to go underwater 30 times to get a scene right. She was so committed that she wore out 3 pairs of shoes in one day and fainted twice from being too tired. The movie was very successful, making over $1 million. Everyone enjoyed Debbie's show, and critics admired her energy and entertainment value. She got an Oscar nod, which was her only one ever, but she didn't win. The award went to Julie Andrews for Mary Poppins. Being nominated helped make Debbie one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. This movie proved that she was not just the girl next door. She could handle major parts and do well. After that, Debbie became more famous. She was featured on the cover of Life magazine and left her handprints at Grauman's Chinese Theater. At the event, she thanked Gene Kelly for teaching her all about dance. In 1969, Debbie tried something new by starting her TV show, The Debbie Reynolds Show. The show was popular initially, but Debbie quit after 1 season because she didn't want it to have cigarette ads, even though she lost a lot of money by leaving. People respected her for defending her views. Debbie acted on Broadway and became very famous. In 1973, she played in the show Irene, which set records and had over 600 performances. She took the show on tour and performed it over 1,500 times. Even as she got older, she kept acting in other shows. At 57, she spent 2 years touring with the unthinkable Molly Brown across the U.S., performing 8 shows each week. Audiences loved her energy and ability, just like when the movie first came out. Later, Debbie acted on TV shows like Will and Grace, where she played a funny and memorable part as Deborah Messing's mom. This earned her an Emmy nomination. Debbie Reynolds was always busy performing and was well loved by her fans. She proved many times that she could handle any difficulties and keep shining. However, she dealt with many issues that weren't visible to those who saw her beautiful life. In 1992, she and her third husband, Richard Hamlet, bought a shut-down hotel in Las Vegas for $2. They spent $2 million to call it the Debbie Reynolds Hollywood Hotel. She wanted to make it very popular by adding a stage and a museum for her collection of Hollywood items. But things didn't go smoothly from the beginning. At first, the hotel began to experience problems. The casino was losing $112,000 each month, and the staff dining room cost $75,000 a month. By 1994, they were losing $450,000 every month. Debbie tried various ways to save the business. She spent millions on improvements and took the business public, but it still didn't succeed. After her split from Hamlet in 1996, things became more difficult for her, and she attempted to sell the hotel for $16 million, $8 million, but didn't find a buyer before then. In 1997, she had to declare bankruptcy because her hotel was sold for only $1,650,000, which was much less than she expected. Debbie had faced money problems before. Her second husband, Harry Carl, spent all her money, $15 million, and left her with $2 million in debt. She took 10 years to pay it off. In 2009, she faced bankruptcy again because her idea to move her Hollywood Museum to Tennessee didn't work out after the developer went bankrupt. To pay off her debts, she had to sell some of her valuable things, including Marilyn Monroe's famous white dress from The 7-Year Itch, which sold for $4. In 2011, Debbie had $6 million, but she felt really sad when she gave up her collection. Even though she seemed lively, she had health problems throughout her life. She had rheumatoid arthritis, which caused her joints to swell and made it hard for her to dance. She kept acting despite the pain to help her family. In 2012, when she was 80 years old, she faced a major health problem and had to cancel her shows for a few months. Debbie didn't talk about her health much in public because she wanted to appear strong. She talked about her struggles and urged others to keep going even when life gets difficult. In 1979, Debbie changed the dance world by turning an old post office into the Debbie Reynolds Dance Studio. This school welcomed anyone who wanted to learn dance and kept class prices low at only $111 so everyone could join. Debbie helped create the studio's special dance floor, which was perfect for dancers. Famous stars like Michael Jackson, Madonna, and Britney Spears trained there, which made the studio well known. Sadly, the old building was torn down later. In 2019, her son helped her continue her dream by starting the Debbie Reynolds Legacy Studios, which still offers dance lessons today. Debbie loved Hollywood history. In 1970, when MGM Studios sold their old outfits and props, she spent $600,000 to buy important items that she thought should be preserved. She gathered thousands of things over time. Debbie invested a lot of time and money collecting Hollywood items, such as Charlie Chaplin's bowler hat, Elizabeth Taylor's headdress from Cleopatra, and Marilyn Monroe's iconic white dress, which she purchased for $200 and later sold for millions. Despite facing money problems, she kept saving these pieces because of her love for them. In the end, she had to sell most of her collection to pay off her bills. In 1966, Debbie Reynolds and Elizabeth Taylor reunited years after a scandal had broken their friendship. It happened by chance on a cruise ship named the Queen Elizabeth. As Debbie walked down the hallway, she noticed a line of suitcases, bird cages, and dog crates. She understood that Elizabeth was on the plane. Debbie thought about moving, but her husband urged her to stay. Instead of staying away from Elizabeth, Debbie wrote her a note proposing they have dinner together to discuss things. Elizabeth was surprised, but said yes. At dinner, they talked about their past, and Elizabeth said she was sorry. Debbie apologized to Elizabeth for taking her husband, Eddie Fisher. Debbie was shocked by this and thought it was very important. Later, Debbie had to decide whether to stay angry or move forward. She chose to forgive Elizabeth because she cared about their friendship. Years later, their friendship was strong again, especially during the events of September 11, 2001, when both women were stuck in New York. Elizabeth invited Debbie to stay at her hotel. Their friendship helped them collaborate on a movie called These Old Broads in 2001. Deb's daughter, Carrie Fisher, shares a story about two women who are both interested in the same guy. The story mirrors the challenges they face in real life. It shows that they have moved on and can now laugh about their past. Debbie frequently talked about how her breakup with Eddie Fisher impacted her. It was sad, but it helped her become stronger. She once said that a guy only leaves if he chooses to, which helped her move on without feeling angry. People felt sympathy for her, and her job improved. By age 26, she was a single mom to her children, Carrie and Todd, and needed to keep working to support them. In her book, Unsinkable, she mentioned how hard it was. Debbie was very focused on caring for her family. Sadly, her story ended tragically. Carrie Fisher, her daughter, died from a medical accident on December 27, 2016. The next day, while planning Carrie's funeral, Debbie had a stroke and died as well. Before she passed away, Debbie told her son that she wanted to be with Carrie, which showed their close relationship. Later, her son said she didn't die because she was sad, she just decided to be with her daughter. Many fans were surprised and upset by their deaths. Celebrities paid tribute to two important people who died around the same time. A few days later, HBO aired a documentary called Bright Lights that focused on the unique bond between Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds. Debbie and Carrie were buried side by side, staying close even after their passing.